All right. So when you're talking in a podcast and sometimes you start screaming or maybe you cough and that's obviously a lot louder than your normal talking. Well, what if there was a tool that could make it so that these were the same volume as you talking normally? Because it's a lot more pleasant to listen to the same volume than a rapidly changing volume. Well, that's what a compressor does. It will take these parts that are too loud and it will reduce them in volume without affecting the rest of your speech. And that makes it a much more constant volume, and that's much more pleasant to the ear. So let's jump into Reaper and see how we might use compression. So look at this audio here. I'm talking here, it's kind of quiet, and here it's a lot louder. And let's listen to it.
How do you lift an elephant? Nothing. He just waved.
So that was not optimal because this is much quieter than this, and you might be surprised or you might have to turn down your volume. Either way, this is not good. And the best way to fix this is just by talking at the same volume throughout your whole podcast. But if you can't do that, you can use a compressor. So let's add the compressor effect. The compressor effect in Reaper is titled Recomp. And here are your controls. The main controls are the threshold and ratio. Then the attack and release are kind of difficult and finicky, but you can usually leave them at the same level. And then these other controls you might not see in every other compressor, so I wouldn't really worry about them. So let's play this on loop.
How do you lift an elephant? Nothing. He just waved.
So let's look at the volume where it's quiet, because a compressor can make loud parts quieter. It won't bring up the volume of the quiet parts, but you can do that manually. I'll show you that later. So let's listen to this part.
How do you lift an elephant?
So we want the threshold to be right about at the top of where the quiet part is,
How do you lift an elephant?
like right
How
around
do you
there,
lift an elephant?
so that it doesn't affect this audio. Now let's listen to this part.
Nothing. He just waved. Nothing.
So you'll notice that the volume is going above where we set it.
Nothing.
And if we adjust the ratio, it will tell the compressor how much it should be turning it down when it's too loud. And this tells us when it's too loud, this tells us what we should do about it. So as we increase the ratio from 1 to infinity, this will get quieter and quieter and more in line with this volume. And it will also become more compressed. There's a sound that compression has that you don't always want, so you got to be careful.
Nothing. He just waved. Nothing. He just waved. Nothing. He just waved.
And it's really quiet now, but that's okay because most compressors have this auto makeup or makeup gain setting, and you can turn that on. If it doesn't, you can just increase the volume after you're done compressing. So let's hear it with the makeup gain. The whole thing will sound louder.
How do you lift an elephant? Nothing. He just waved.
So now those sound closer in volume, and we can increase the ratio or lower the threshold to have them even closer in volume, although the more we do that, the more compressed it will sound. And naturally, voices are not compressed, but on the radio, they're usually more compressed than what we hear in everyday life. So it's fine to have a little bit of the compression-y sound, but it's also fine to have some parts louder than other parts. So let's hear it.
How do you lift an elephant? Nothing. He just waved.
It sounded like I was talking at the same volume throughout the whole thing. Now, these settings are kind of extreme. I would not set these so far, but I'm just doing it so you can hear what compression sounds like. So let's look at a different example. Let's look at this. Let's delete the compressor, hear what it sounds like normally.
How do you lift an elephant? It depends on the price.
Oh, we've got a pop. That's the sound it makes when you blow a bunch of air into the microphone. And it's generally good practice not to do that. So let's see how well a compressor works against this.
How How do you lift an elephant? It depends on the price.
In fact, we'll just worry about this little section here.
It depends on the price. It depends.
So we'll put the slider about here because that's where most of the words are, and it's only the P that really goes above that slider.
It depends on the price.
And we'll go ahead and do makeup gain just so I can hear it better over my air conditioner.
It depends on the price. It depends on the price. It depends.
Now you'll hear that it kind of ducks the volume after the P, and that happened not only because of the compressor, because my microphone kind of compressed it a little bit by itself. So that's where the attack and release come in. The sound you hear where you hear something really loud and then it kind of quickly turns the volume down and then slowly fades up, that's the release. The more noticeable that is corresponds to a longer release. And an attack is just how soon it starts compressing. So if we leave the attack here,
it depends on the price.
It will let the loud part in for a little bit before it starts compressing. And if we have it here,
it depends on the price.
It doesn't let any of the loud part go through. So if you have longer attack and releases, it'll sound more natural, but it will be less noticeable. The effect won't work as well. And if you have it up here, it'll sound distorted.
It depends on the price.
So I typically have a shorter attack and release than the defaults, but you can pretty much just leave them where they are. I wouldn't worry too much about those. It's mostly the threshold and the ratio. Now you'll notice
it depends on the price.
This still sounds bad. So it would sound better if we manually lowered the volume of this and didn't use compression at all.
It depends on the price.
But if you've got a whole podcast, you can't do that with every single one. So you're more likely to use a compressor if you have hours of you just going into the microphone. It would be better to use a compressor. But a better thing to do would be to use a pop filter. So here's what that sounds like.
It depends on the price.
That's the audio without a compressor. It's just me putting a hat on my microphone. So, and that dampened the P's going in to the microphone. And so that will usually sound better than trying to fix it with compression, is fixing it before it even turns into audio. That's usually the good practice. Though one thing with just putting a hat on the microphone, it does sound a little bit more muffled. So maybe that's a trade-off. Maybe you just get better at saying your P's so that the microphone doesn't pick up on them so much. So that is one possible use of compression, but it's better to use compression when you have longer sections of audio that are varying in volume. For example, some syllables, some words, some sentences that are louder than other syllables, words, and sentences. Usually with the P's, you want to fix that by the way you're recording. So that's compression. Remember, don't use too much of it, as if it sounds fine, you don't need it, but it can help you make voices sound more in the same volume range if you have problems with some parts of your podcast being much louder than others. Compression is a good automatic way of fixing that.